The moment Jihu's hands touched the controls, the world dissolved. The quiet, dark cockpit vanished. A tidal wave of sensation crashed into his mind. It was not like reading a screen or hearing sounds. It was a flood of pure feeling. He felt the cold of space on the ship's skin. He felt the gentle pull of the station's artificial gravity, like a soft tug on his own body. He could sense the positions of every person on the observation deck. Sumin's hopeful curiosity was a warm glow. Commander Jin's tense suspicion, a cold, sharp knot. The ship was sharing everything it felt, and it was all pouring directly into Jihu's brain. The calm voice spoke in his mind again. Pilot accepted. Symbiotic interface initiated. On the observation deck, chaos erupted. Lights flashed across every console. A low, powerful thrumming filled the bay, vibrating through the floor. "It's fully active," Taeshik yelled, his fingers flying over his screen. "Energy levels are climbing past anything we've ever recorded. The hull composition is changing, it's becoming more dense." Commander Jin leaned forward, his knuckles white on the railing. "He's moving. Get me a flight path. I want to know what he's doing." But Jihu wasn't doing anything in the way they understood. He wasn't following a procedure. He was reacting. The feeling of the ship was overwhelming. A warning symbol appeared in his mind, not as a light, but as a feeling of tightness, a sense of something in the way. It was the large support arm that held the ship in place when it was powered down. Without thinking, Jihu just wanted the feeling to go away. He thought of his old salvage ship, how he would gently push away from a space rock. He nudged the control yoke forward with his mind as much as his hands. The Sentinel slid forward. It did not fire thrusters. It simply moved, gliding smoothly away from the support arm. The movement was utterly silent and looked effortless. A collective gasp went up from the deck. They had never seen the ship move under its own power. It was beautiful and terrifying. His flight pattern it's chaotic, Taeshik reported, staring at his data stream. "There's no pre-programmed course. The neural link is direct. The ship is reading his intentions almost before he forms them." Jihu took a deep breath. The initial shock was fading, replaced by a strange, growing excitement. This was nothing like flying a clunky, broken-down freighter. This was like wearing a new skin. He thought about turning, and the ship banked, curving around the inside of the vast bay. The response was instant, perfect. He saw the main bay doors, which led out to open space. They were closed. A part of him, the salvager used to being trapped in broken hulls, felt a sudden spike of claustrophobia. He needed to get out. He needed to feel open space. The ship understood. On the deck, a new alarm blared. "He's targeting the bay doors." A technician shouted, "Stop him!" Jin roared. "He'll decompress the entire bay." But it was too late. A beam of soft white light erupted from the Sentinel's nose. It was not a violent, explosive blast. It touched the massive bay doors, and the thick metal simply dissolved. It unraveled like a piece of cloth, melting away in complete silence to create a perfect round opening to the star-filled blackness beyond. Before anyone could react, the Sentinel shot forward. It slipped through the new opening and into the open void, moving from the controlled environment of the station to the infinite freedom of space. Jin slammed his fist on the console. "He's loose! Track him. Get fighters after him." Sumin grabbed his arm. "Wait, Commander, look." On the main screen, the Sentinel was not running away. It was dancing. It rolled and spun around the station, its movements fluid and unpredictable. It would dart towards a communication antenna, then flip backwards at the last second. It would accelerate hard, then stop on a pinhead, hanging motionless in the vacuum. Inside the cockpit, Jihu was laughing. He couldn't help it. The sheer joy of it was overwhelming. He wasn't fighting the controls. He and the ship were one. A thought of "what if I loop around that satellite?" became a reality a split second later. The ship was an extension of his own body, his own will. Two Concordance fighter ships, sleek and angular, shot out of another bay. Their pilots were professionals. They moved in a tight, coordinated pattern, trying to flank the Sentinel. "Jihu, this is Commander Jin." Jin's voice crackled, harsh and metallic, through a newly established comlink. "Return to the station immediately. That is a direct order." Jihu heard the words, but they felt distant, unimportant. The two fighters were a new sensation. He could feel their engine wash, the focus of their pilots. They felt like predators. His old instincts, the ones he used when navigating dangerous salvage fields, kicked in. He didn't attack. He evaded. The lead fighter fired a low-powered tracer laser, a warning shot meant to force him to yield. Ji-Hoo didn't see it on a screen. He felt it as a sharp, hot pinpoint of energy coming towards him. He didn't calculate an evasion vector. He just flinched. The sentinel dropped straight down relative to the station, the laser beam passing harmlessly overhead. The movement was so sudden and illogical that the fighter pilot overshot completely. The second fighter came in from below. Ji-Hoo felt its approach like a pressure from underneath. He pushed the controls forward and the sentinel shot upward, then twisted into a corkscrew spin around the second fighter. The pilot, confused by the wild, close-range maneuver, broke off, his targeting computer unable to get a lock. Taishik was watching the data, his frustration replaced with pure awe. It's incredible. He's not using any standard maneuvers. He's not even thinking about combat. He's just reacting. He moves like he's avoiding debris in an asteroid field. It's messy. It's inefficient by the book, but it's perfectly effective. The ship was built for this. Back in the cockpit, the initial rush of freedom was calming. The ship's presence in his mind was no longer a flood. It was a steady, reassuring stream. He felt the ship's curiosity. It was testing him, learning from him. He guided it in a wide, slow arc, bringing it to a stop just outside the bay door he had opened, facing the station. On the observation deck, everyone was silent. The two fighter ships hovered a distance away, their pilots waiting for new orders. Ji-Hoo's voice came over the comm. It sounded different, tired, but clear and calm. "It's okay," he said. "I'm coming back in." The sentinel moved forward, sliding gracefully back through the opening it had made. As it passed through, the white light touched the edges of the hole again. The metal flowed back into place, sealing the bay door perfectly, as if it had never been damaged. The ship came to a rest in the center of the bay, its soft hum lowering to a quiet purr. The cockpit membrane rippled open. Ji-Hoo floated out. He looked pale and exhausted, sweat on his forehead, but his eyes were bright. He looked at Su-min and Commander Jin, who were now waiting for him on the bay floor. Jin's face was a mask of controlled anger. "You destroyed station property. You ignored a direct order. He made contact, Commander," Su-min interrupted, her voice filled with wonder. She was looking not at Ji-Hoo, but at the ship. "Real, full contact. No one else has ever done that." Ji-Hoo landed on the floor, his legs a little unsteady. He looked at the sentinel. "It doesn't like to be called it," he said quietly. "She told me. Her name is Kumiho." He turned to Jin. "And she wasn't trying to escape. She was just stretching her legs. She's been asleep for a very, very long time." Jin stared at him, his mouth a thin line. The man in front of him was no longer just a simple salvager. He was the key to the most powerful tool they had. And that tool had just chosen its own pilot. The air in the zero-G bay was thick with tension. Commander Jin stood with his arms crossed, his eyes fixed on Ji-Hoo. The salvager looked tired, but there was a new light in his eyes. Behind him, the ship called Kumiho rested, its dark surface still humming softly. Stretching her legs? Jin's voice was cold. "You opened a hole to space because she was bored?" Ji-Hoo shook his head. He was still trying to put the experience into words. "It wasn't like that. It's a feeling. She needed to move. She's been still for too long. It was like an ache." Su-min stepped forward, her scientist's curiosity overpowering the fear of the moment. "What else did you learn?" "What is she?" "She's lonely," Ji-Hoo said simply. He looked back at the ship. "And she's old." "So old." Jin was not interested in feelings. "Can you fight with it? Can you use its weapons against the Cathar?" Ji-Hoo frowned. The question felt wrong. When Jin said weapons, it felt like a rough, ugly sound. I don't know." "She didn't show me any weapons. She just showed me how to fly." "Then you will learn," Jin said. It was an order. "You have 1 week. Then we run combat simulations. That is final." He turned and marched away, his boots echoing in the large room. Su-min stayed. She looked at Ji-Hoo with a gentle expression. "He is under a lot of pressure. The Cathar are coming." "I know," Ji-Hoo said. He looked at his hands. "But when I'm connected to her, it's peaceful. It doesn't feel like war." Over the next few days, Ji-Hoo spent every waking hour in the cockpit. The station engineers, led by Taishik, covered the bay with sensors, trying to learn everything they could. Ji-Hoo learned to control the connection. He found he could lower the flow of information, so it was less overwhelming. He practiced moving Kumiho around the bay. He learned to make her stop instantly, to turn in impossibly tight circles, to hover without a single sound. The ship continued to share her feelings. There was a deep sadness, a memory of great loss, but there was also a growing sense of interest. She was curious about Jihu. His mind was different from anything she had known before. During one of these sessions, Sumin's voice came over the comm. Jihu, we are going to try a simple test. We are releasing a training drone into the bay. It will fire low-energy beams. Your task is to avoid them. A small spherical drone floated into the bay. A moment later, it fired a harmless red laser towards Kumiho. Jihu felt a spike of alarm from the ship. It was not fear for itself. It was a protective feeling, like a mother putting an arm out for her child. The laser beam hit an invisible energy field a few feet from Kumiho's hull and scattered into a shower of harmless sparks. Fascinating, Sumin said. It has a passive defense shield. It reacts to perceived threats automatically. The drone fired again. This time, Jihu was ready. He didn't want to just hide behind the shield. He thought about moving. He and Kumiho slid to the side, the laser missing completely. The drone fired faster, sending multiple beams. Jihu moved without thinking. He weaved and ducked, his movements guided by instinct. He felt the paths of the lasers before they were fired. He and Kumiho moved as one, a dark blur in the bay, never being hit. He's not even using the shield anymore, Taeshik observed from the control room. He's predicting the firing patterns. No, Sumin whispered. He's not predicting. He's feeling them. After the test, Jin watched the recording. He saw the graceful, impossible movements. He saw the perfect defense. Good, he said, a grim smile on his face. Now we know it can defend itself. The next test is offense. I want to see its weapons. The next day, the mood was more serious. A larger drone, a target dummy used for weapons practice, was placed in the bay. Jihu, Jin's voice came over the comm. Destroy the target. Jihu sat in the cockpit. He felt a cold knot in his stomach. He looked at the drone. It was just a machine, a thing of metal and wires. But the idea of destroying it felt wrong. He could feel Kumiho's agreement. A sense of refusal washed over him. I don't think I can, Jihu said. It is an order, pilot. Jin's voice was hard. Jihu took a deep breath. He focused on the target drone. He tried to form the intention to attack. He looked for a weapon in his mind, a button to press, a trigger to pull. Nothing happened. He pushed his mind harder. He thought of lasers, of missiles, of pure force. He willed Kumiho to fire. The ship remained still. The gentle hum within the cockpit grew quieter. He felt a distinct feeling of withdrawal, like Kumiho was pulling away from him. It's not working, Jihu reported, feeling frustrated and embarrassed. Is it refusing? Sumin asked. I don't know. There's nothing to refuse. There are no weapons. Or if there are, she won't show them to me. Jin's sigh was loud over the comm. Unacceptable. A ship that will not fight is useless to us. Later, alone in the cockpit, Jihu placed his hands on the controls. He wasn't trying to fly. He was just trying to talk. Why? He thought. Why won't you help us? They are coming to destroy everything. We need to fight. A flood of images filled his mind. They were not clear pictures, but feelings and impressions. He saw a world of great beauty, with cities made of light and crystal. He saw people with gentle minds who created art and music. They were the builders. Then he saw a shadow fall over them. A warlike species, all rage and hunger. They came with fire and noise. The builders tried to reason with them. They tried to hide, but their peaceful minds could not understand the chaos of war. They could not predict the illogical, brutal attacks. They were wiped out. The memory was not of a battle, but of a great silence falling, a light going out. The last thing they did was create the Sentinels. They made them to protect life. But they knew their own peaceful nature was a weakness. So they built the ships to need a different kind of mind, a mind that could understand chaos without being consumed by it. A mind that could survive. The ship had waited, sleeping for a long, long time. It had tested thousands of pilots. Their minds were all wrong. They were either too violent, too much like the destroyers, or they were too peaceful, too much like the builders. They were all rejected, until a human touched the controls. A human mind was a strange mix. It could be kind, but it was also stubborn. It could create beautiful things, but it was also a master of survival. It was adaptable. It was resilient. It was not perfect, but it was strong in its imperfections. Jihu understood. Kumiho was not a weapon. She was a shield. Her purpose was not to kill, but to protect. To stop a fight before it could start. He opened his eyes. Sumin was standing outside the cockpit waiting for him. She's not a soldier, Jihu said, his voice quiet. She's a guardian. She was built by peaceful people who knew they couldn't win a war, so they built something that could stop one. Sumin looked at the ship, her eyes wide with a new understanding. Then how, she asked, does a shield stop an army? Jihu looked at the dark, smooth hull. He could feel the ship's ancient power and its very specific, very firm rules. I don't know, he said, but we have to find out before the Cathar get here. The mood on the station changed. Before there was hope mixed with fear. Now the hope was fading, replaced by a grim tension. Jihu had bonded with the alien ship, but the ship refused to be a weapon. Commander Jin saw this as a failure. He spent most of his time in the command center, planning the station's defense with conventional weapons. Jihu and Sumin, however, worked together. They spent long hours in the bay with Kumiho. Sumin asked questions and Jihu, connected to the ship, tried to find answers. What can she do? Sumin asked. If she will not destroy. Jihu sat in the cockpit, his eyes closed. He let the question float in his mind. Kumiho responded not with words but with concepts. He saw images of tangled wires being neatly sorted. He saw a broken engine being taken apart piece by piece without force. He saw a wild animal being calmed with a soft sound. She disassembles, Jihu said, struggling for the right word. She can take things apart. Not with explosions, gently. She can stop machines from working. Sumin typed notes on her datapad. Non-lethal neutralization. What about living beings? Can she affect minds? Another concept flowed into Jihu's mind. A feeling of confusion, then clarity. A feeling of sudden, overwhelming peace. An aggressive creature forgetting why it was angry. She can share feelings, he said. She can project calm. Or fear, or confusion. It's like she talks to their instincts, not their thoughts. This was their focus. They began a new series of tests. They brought in broken machines. Jihu with Kumiho would focus on them. A beam of soft light would touch a broken reactor, and its parts would gently separate, making it safe. A malfunctioning computer would suddenly power down, all its systems resetting to zero. They tried it on animals. An aggressive lab animal bred for testing was placed in a secure room. When Jihu and Kumiho projected a wave of calm, the animal stopped its snarling, lay down, and went to sleep. Taishik watched it all, his engineer's mind fascinated. It's incredible technology. It doesn't break anything, it just persuades it to stop. But Commander Jin was not persuaded. He watched a demonstration where Jihu used Kumiho to perfectly disassemble a target drone until it was a neat pile of harmless components. A clever trick, Jin said, his voice flat. The Cathar will not be impressed. They do not want to be calmed. They want to conquer. You cannot reason with a hurricane. The builders were not trying to reason, Sumin argued. They were trying to survive. A shield can be stronger than a sword. Jin looked at the sentinel, his eyes hard. We will see. The warning came 2 days later. A long-range sensor picket sent a frantic message before it was destroyed. The Cathar war fleet had arrived. They were not weeks away. They were hours away. The station erupted into controlled panic. Alarm lights flashed. Crew members ran to battle stations. Jin's voice came over the general address system, calm but firm. All personnel, this is not a drill. The Cathar are here. Assume defensive positions. This is what we have trained for. Good luck. Jihu stood in the bay looking at Kumiho. His heart was pounding. This was not a test. This was real. Sumin ran up to him, her face pale. You don't have to do this, she said. You are a salvager, not a soldier. Jihu looked at the ship. He could feel her waiting. She was not afraid. She was resolved. She had been built for this moment. She's not asking me to be a soldier, he said. She's asking me to be a partner. He climbed into the cockpit. The membrane sealed behind him. The familiar connection snapped into place, stronger than ever. He could feel the approaching Cathar fleet like a storm on the horizon. A dark, angry cloud of noise and violence. Commander Jin's face appeared on a small screen in the cockpit. Jihu, the fleet is here. Our orders are to hold the line. You are our only unknown factor. Do what you can. The main bay doors, the massive ones that had not been damaged, began to open. Outside, the stars were blotted out by the shapes of Cathar warships. They were jagged and ugly, covered in sharp angles and glowing red lights. They looked like floating fortresses made of knives. The Concordance defense fighters streamed out of the station, their engines bright. The battle began immediately. Laser fire lit up the darkness. Explosions bloomed silently in the vacuum. Jihu took a deep breath. He pushed the control yoke forward. Kumiho slid out of the bay and into the chaos. The first Cathar fighter saw him and swooped in, its weapons firing. Jihu felt the attack coming. He and Kumiho rolled sideways, the lasers missing by inches. He didn't return fire. He focused on the fighter, projecting a feeling of confusion, of system failure. The Cathar fighter shuddered. Its firing stopped. It drifted for a moment, its lights flickering. Then it turned and flew away from the battle, disoriented. It was working. Jihu flew deeper into the fray. He became a ghost on the battlefield. He weaved between the giant Cathar cruisers. He would focus on a weapons battery and a pulse of white light would wash over it. The giant laser cannons would fall silent, their power drained. He flew near a group of Cathar fighters. He projected a wave of pure primal fear. The fighters, as one, broke formation and scattered, their pilots overcome by a terror they did not understand. On the bridge of the station, Commander Jin watched the tactical display. Icons representing Cathar ships were winking out, not because they were destroyed, but because they were disabled. They were drifting, powerless, or they were fleeing. "What is he doing?" one of the officers asked, amazed. "He's not fighting them," Jin said, a slow understanding dawning on his face. "He's untangling them." But the Cathar were adaptable. Their command ship, a massive dagger-shaped vessel, took notice of the strange, dark ship that was dismantling their attack. It turned its main weapon, a powerful energy cannon, towards Kumiho. A warning scream echoed in Jihu's mind. It was not from Kumiho. It was from the station. "Jihu, get out of there," Sumin's voice shouted over the comm. "They have a target lock." The Cathar flagship fired. A beam of pure red energy, wide enough to swallow a freighter, shot across space directly at Kumiho. There was no time to dodge. In that split second, Jihu didn't think of evasion. He thought of protection. He thought of the station, of Sumin, of all the people inside. He poured that feeling into the ship, Kumiho responded. Instead of moving away, she moved forward. She positioned herself directly in the path of the massive beam. Her entire hull glowed with a brilliant white light. The red beam hit the white light. There was no explosion. The violent red energy washed over Kumiho's shield and changed. It softened. It spread out, becoming a harmless, shimmering curtain of light that dissipated into the void. She had not blocked the attack. She had transformed it. A stunned silence fell over the battlefield. The Cathar flagship had fired its most powerful weapon, and it had done nothing. Jihu, breathing heavily, looked at the giant warship. He could feel its confusion, its frustration, and then he felt a new idea form in his mind, a suggestion from Kumiho. It was bold. It was dangerous. He pushed the controls forward. Kumiho shot straight towards the Cathar command ship. The Cathar command ship filled the view from Kumiho's cockpit. It was a mountain of dark metal and sharp edges, its surface covered with weapon ports that glowed with a threatening red light. To fly straight at it was suicide for any normal ship. But Jihu was not in a normal ship. Alarms blared on the Cathar bridge. They tracked the small dark vessel approaching at an impossible speed. Point defense lasers fired, creating a web of deadly light. But Jihu and Kumiho weaved through it. They moved like a leaf on the wind, unpredictable and graceful. The lasers could not touch them. Inside the cockpit, Jihu was not thinking about attack. He was focusing on the plan Kumiho had shown him. It was not a plan of violence. It was a plan of communication, a desperate last attempt to make them understand. He flew Kumiho right up to the hull of the giant warship. He did not fire. Instead, he reached out with the ship's energy and touched the dark metal. On the bridge of the Cathar ship, the commander, a tall being with rough gray skin and cold eyes, watched the screen. "What is it doing?" "Destroy it." But before his crew could react, the main viewing screen flickered. The image of the battle was replaced by something else. It was not a normal transmission. It was a feeling, projected directly into their minds. They saw the builders. They saw their beautiful crystal cities under a gentle sun. They saw art and music and peace. Then they saw the destroyers, the ancient enemies of the builders. They saw the fire and the noise and the mindless rage. They felt the terror of the builders as they were hunted, as their civilization was erased from the galaxy. They felt the profound, silent grief of a universe losing a gentle light. The Cathar commander shook his head, trying to clear the vision. "It is a trick, it is weak. Destroy the ship!" But the vision continued. It showed the creation of the Sentinels. It showed their purpose, not to kill, but to protect. To be a shield for life against mindless destruction. It showed the long, lonely sleep, the rejection of thousands of pilots who were either too violent or too peaceful. Finally, it showed a human. A simple salvager named Jihu. It showed his chaotic, resilient mind. It showed his will to survive, not to conquer. And it showed the moment of connection, the moment the machine finally found its partner. The Cathar commander felt all of this. He felt the history. He felt the purpose, and for the first time, he saw his own people not as mighty conquerors but as the latest version of the ancient destroyers. He saw the endless, empty cycle of violence. He saw the truth. The ship was not a weapon to be won. It was a choice to be made. Outside, Jihu held Kumiho against the hull of the command ship. He was pouring all his energy, all his will into the transmission. He was showing them another way. On the Concordance station, everyone watched, holding their breath. The entire Cathar fleet had stopped firing. They floated silently in space, waiting. Then the impossible happened. The Cathar command ship powered down its weapons. The red lights on its hull winked out. One by one, the other ships in the fleet did the same. The battle was over. A single, simple message came from the Cathar commander. It was not translated by a computer. It was a single word, filled with the weight of the vision they had all shared. Enough. The Cathar fleet turned. Slowly, silently, they moved away from the station. They jumped into faster-than-light travel and disappeared, leaving behind a quiet and peaceful starfield. For a long moment, there was complete silence on the station's bridge. Then a cheer erupted. They had won. They were alive. Jihu guided Kumiho back into the bay. The cockpit opened and he climbed out, his legs shaking. He was utterly exhausted. Su-min ran to him, a huge smile on her face, and caught him in a hug. Commander Jin approached slowly. He looked at Jihu, then at the dark, silent ship. He had seen the end of the battle on the sensors. He had seen the Cathar fleet leave. "You showed them," Jin said, his voice low. It was not a question. Jihu nodded. "She showed them. I was just the pilot." Jin was quiet for a long time. The strict military part of him wanted to be angry. There were no glorious battles, no defeated enemies. But the logical part of him knew the truth. They had achieved a perfect victory. Not a single ship on their side was lost. The enemy was not destroyed, but they were gone. It was a miracle. He looked at Jihu, this simple man from the scrapyards, and he saw him properly for the first time. He was not a soldier. He was something more. "You did what none of us could," Jin said finally. He did not smile, but his eyes held a new respect. "You understood the machine." In the days that followed, the station returned to normal. Repairs began. The story of the battle spread across the Concordance. They called it the miracle at Kepler 186F. They called Jihu the pilot of peace. But Jihu did not feel like a hero. He spent his time in the bay with Kumiho. The ship was quiet now, her purpose fulfilled. But she was also content. The loneliness was gone. Su-min found him there one evening, just sitting and looking at the ship. "What will you do now?" she asked. Jihu shrugged. "I don't know. They offered me a job, a fancy title, a nice uniform, and—" He smiled a little. "It doesn't feel right. This," he gestured to Kumiho, "was never about a job." He placed a hand on the ship's cool hull. He could still feel her presence, gentle and steady. "The machine rejected every pilot," he said softly, "because they all wanted to use her. They saw a tool, a weapon." He looked at Su-min. She wasn't looking for a user. She was looking for a friend. He made his decision. He would not stay in the military. He would not be an officer. He asked for one thing only. He asked for a small ship, a simple freighter to be his own. The Concordance agreed. They gave him a good ship, one that was reliable and strong. On the day he left, Su-min and Commander Jin came to see him off. "Where will you go?" Su-min asked. "Out there," Jihu said, pointing to the stars. "There's a lot of space to see. A lot of quiet places. As he boarded his new ship, he gave one last look at the zero-G bay. Kumiho rested there, dark and silent. But he knew she was not sad. Her long wait was over. Her mission was complete. Jihu started the engines of his freighter and flew out of the bay. He did not look back. He was a salvager again, a simple man in a simple ship, but he was not alone. In his mind, a soft, gentle presence remained, a connection that would never break. He was the human who had touched the controls, and in doing so, he had not just activated a machine, he had made a friend for life. And as he flew into the vast open stars, he knew that somewhere, in the heart of a silent alien ship, his friend was dreaming peaceful dreams, finally at rest.